Welcome everyone to the Flux Dev Meeting. It's October 23rd, 2024. Just pulling up the agenda here, see what we have. Is there anyone who'd like to go first?
I think we don't have much things, so we can I'll just start. I created a issue related to cache metrics, which I discussed last week, and I added details about what are the issues with the cache we have in source controller. The current I can briefly describe what I wrote up there. In the meeting notes, there is a link to the issue. So the existing cache in source controller is only for Helm index, and the metric is named very generically. It's like what's the name for that? GOTK cache, and the metric name like cache event total something, and it has labels for the Helm repository object name in namespace. It doesn't have a kind. So if you know that there is only one cache in source control, that's the Helm repository cache. Helm repository cache, it's okay. But now when we add new cache, like the auth cache for Git authentication token or OC authentication tokens, that will create confusion. By the name of the existing metric, it's not clear what it is about. There's no kind label in the metric. So it's difficult to know what the cache is related to. So that's one problem. And the new cache implementation, which is a generic type cache, that in there, the metric in that new cache, we export or we set the label of the kind of the object as well. So it's clear there. So when we use the new cache, it'll be clear. But that also means we'll have multiple caches, and maybe we should name the metric accordingly. Like the name of the metric should make it clear what it is about. So I have proposed like maybe we should add a parser prefix when we create a cache. So we can create those metrics like GOTK, Git auth cache, or GOTK OCA auth cache. And we got some comments agreeing to that. I'll come back to this. I have some things to discuss. The third thing was when we do these things, introduce new metrics which are more explicit and have new labels, we'll have to drop the existing metric, and that can cause the existing users monitoring setup to break.
Isn't there a way to implement this in a way that we don't need to drop the metric? Like we introduce the new metrics, but we keep the old one?
So we need to clear the confusion. The metric name is very generic. We cannot keep it generic anymore.
Okay, so right now in the current state of source controller, the metric no longer makes sense already at this point.
I would say since the beginning, it should have at least had a kind to make it more clear. We can introduce kind, but when you have multiple caches.
But did it get confusing because of how source controller evolved and new features were added that we started using the cache down the road? Or was it confusing from the moment it was created?
Looking at it, so we didn't add anything new. Looking at it now, looking at the pull requests that added it, seems like it should have been there since the beginning. It should have been explicit with a namespace, because source controller has multiple objects. Why doesn't it have a kind?
Well, sorry for the noise. That makes sense. So I would be okay with removing in that case.
Hmm. Um, I'm looking for the issue. Okay. So Stefan and you added some comments, and none of you mentioned about, is it okay if we should drop the existing metric? I'm not sure. I don't think we have any option. If not now, sometime in the future we'll have to, because we'll
Right,
start
right.
adding a prefix.
Yeah, I
And
was
we'll
just
have to
wondering
drop
if we
it.
can't do this like in more like a phased manner, you know. But if it doesn't make sense already, I think it's okay to remove like in the next release.
V1, I think this is not part of our API, so it should be okay. But we need to communicate somehow.
Yeah,
It's not to know who is using it. And our
yeah.
the monitoring dashboard we publish, we do not use this metric in that dashboard.
Mm-hmm.
So those who know, they just use it. Those who don't know, they don't know. They didn't use it. And maybe there's less use case for it now. Maybe a few years ago we had issues with Helm index, and I think last year we started storing the JSON Helm index instead of YAML Helm index, which reduced a lot of memory usage. So chances are there that nobody cares anymore.
Yeah, I agree.
Uh, and so going back to the prefix, so we'll add a prefix. The cache will have a fixed suffix name, which would be like event, a cache event total, and we'll add a prefix, say GOTK git auth, GOTK OCA auth, or whatever. Stefan said, I did not understand what he said. He was like, his statement is given that Git and OCI cannot share the same key token for Azure.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand why he said that. But I think like for the discussion at hand about the metric name, it's like what it means is that he probably is more like on your post at the end you have the examples git off or ci off as part of the metric name, right?
Separate Git or OCI.
Yeah. So I think what that means for this context is that he supports that style. Uh, and but yeah, we should probably maybe clarify what does he mean about specifically the why they can't share the same key token for Azure. But in any case, like for the sake of how we create the metric names, I think that it's just saying that it's probably better if we put the name of the kind directly in the name of the metric rather than as a label, which I agree because I think like as I said in my post is that the use case at hand is what matters the most, right? Like is what um okay, we're going to start using cache for this use case. And this use case may or may not be related to kind. It will most likely never be related to more than one kind, I guess. But it may or may not be related to a kind. I think in most cases it will, and it will be just one. But I think like I don't know. I think it's fine to not have kind as a label and put the kind as part of the name of the metric because of this intuition I have that we'll never have a cache metric that is for more than one kind. What do you think?
So to clarify, when I read your comment, you mentioned that it need not be based on kind, it should be use case. It sounded
Yeah.
like it would be we'll have a shared cache for auth tokens. So Git and OCI will share a common cache.
Mm.
Is that what you're saying? But now you
No,
mentioned that
not
the name
really.
will
Like,
have the object kind, so you don't
yeah,
have to
yeah,
have
you
the
would have
name.
two separate caches for like. I was thinking about not having a cache that holds stuff for more than one kind, but not because this is a choice that is better for like, oh, that it makes so much sense to separate these two, but for the sake of the metric, right? If we are for the sake of the metric name only.
Mhm.
Um,
If the name has Git, I don't think we need a kind.
yes,
It's obvious. And
yeah,
the Helm index metric, we'll rename it to have Helm index in the name, so we don't have to add the label.
yep, yeah, yeah. That's exactly what I mean. So we
It'll-
will be splitting up the cache because of a choice that like is prioritizing the name of the metric and not because it actually makes sense to have the. It's weird to take this decision, to be honest. Don't you think?
Mhm.
Like we'll be we could be using shared caches.
If we do it, like we're not sure. Maybe in some cases we'll have the kind name in the metric name itself, but maybe for some other use case, we need to have the kind name in a label. So the API of the new cache, to accommodate for that, maybe we'll need some option when you initialize the cache for the metric to include the kind label or not in the metric it exports. Because
Yeah.
maybe we'll change our mind. We need the
What would be an example that this off token like would be?
because now we have not decided. We have two ways to do things. We can go either ways, but the existing cache will always add a kind in the metric label. So if we go with uh, name a kind in the metric name, we'll have to remove the kind from the metric label,
Mhm.
which the existing implementation doesn't support. We'll have to add some option to remove the kind if the name has the kind itself.
So the thing is that right now in the current version of Flux, we have two different implementations of cache. One that has the super generic metric name that doesn't have the kind label, and another one that
As a
that
kind.
does have the kind label with a different name for the metric as well.
Right now, it's just a static name. We'll make it dynamic.
But it's the
So
different one from the other one.
it's a different one. Implementation is different. That's another thing we need to discuss. Uh, it's like the cache in source controller is not based on generics. The key is a string, value is an empty interface, which can be any object.
It's the older one, right?
Now, there is an advantage in that the cache can store any type of data.
Mhm.
You can store a Helm index, you can store a string, whatever. There is an advantage with the existing design. The new design uses the Go generics. So whenever you create the cache, you have to
It
start
has a type.
define the type. Now
Mhm.
you cannot share the string value with the Helm index value. That's
And
a
I suppose
disadvantage.
what, yeah, and what's really the advantage of making the cache have a type, like use generics and have a type as a parameter? Because like it's just the conversion part from empty interface to the type you want. Is that really the only?
I I I was absent, I think, when it was implemented, and I asked Sule why it was done this way. Why are we using generics? I think he said it's much better. Things are faster. You know the type of the data that's there. But I don't think there was a proper discussion about the requirements of the cache. Why do we need type cache? In some ways, I feel the existing cache is better for our use cases. So I wanted to discuss that
Yeah.
as well. Should we
I mean,
do
maybe
this?
he's right. Maybe there are performance improvements, but
But
yeah, I think we
is
should
that
discuss
is
about
that
that.
something we need? Is the current
Yeah,
cache any bad?
yeah, I agree with you.
We can discuss again next week. So if I may say.
Yeah.
So there's a possibility that I'll try to entertain that idea. Do we really need this implementation? Or can we just use this empty interface implementation?
Good point.
Okay, that's it for this topic. We'll discuss again next week.
I'm sorry. Maybe I just thought about something because the cache has a maximum amount of items it can hold, right? What if we want to have a different maximum amount of items for the, you know, the use case at hand? Like for tokens, we can have a bigger maximum amount, but for, I don't know, some other heavy object, maybe we want a smaller maximum.
So that's configurable. The user can configure that. It should not be
Right.
hard coded.
Right. And
If
that doesn't have anything with having a type or not, right? Okay, so never mind.
I'll create another issue in the coming weeks discussing about how we configure the cache options, like the TTL, cleanup, and size. How do we configure those? I need to think more about it. Okay, for now, cache discussion is over for now. We'll discuss it again next week. Hopefully, we'll have some conclusion. Next topic is Flux Diff artifact. We discussed this maybe a few weeks ago about what the Flux Diff output should be. And also, I have pasted a link to the discussion. The last time we discussed about it, we concluded that we will copy the upstream Go's implementation of the unified diff code instead of depending on an archived repository. And I left my comment in the PR review saying in the meeting we decided that we'll take the ownership to maintain that code, unified diff code. And while writing those things, that day I did some more research about which implementation to use and which algorithm to use for diff. My research maybe a month or 2 months ago, I did not check the Git diff algorithm, but last month I think I did research about all the different types of Git algorithms that Git supports or are available for people to do diff of 2 files. And I added details about all the options we have. So there's a algorithm called Mayer's algorithm, which is the default in Git diff, which is also used in the archive repository that the current pull request has. It's not an optimal diff algorithm, but it's the default. It works for most of the cases. There is another algorithm. I forgot the name.
Is it the edit distance dynamic programming algorithm? Levenstein distance?
Don't know about that. The other algorithm is patience algorithm. It's used in Torrent, I read somewhere. It's not actually a diff algorithm, but it works as a diff algorithm as well. So the patience algorithm is implemented in the upstream Golang internal package. which is the one I was recommending you should copy. Be more efficient, and the result of this seems to be more easier to read compared to Mayer's algorithm. So I recommended that let's use Patience Diff algorithm. I just recommended it. I don't know. I asked for any comments regarding it. And at the end of it, in my comment, I pasted a snippet of what the existing implementation's output looks like. So you can see a code snippet, which has like from file and the list of all the file, and to file and the list of all the files. So you're comparing from and to, and then you're printing the diff. And for files that are existing in one and not in the other, it just says only in the file name. So looking at that, I thought that doesn't seem ideal. And at that time we discussed that it would be good for Flux users to get some kind of summary. Say this file changed, this file changed, this file got deleted. So that is very similar to Git status, right? You see a file got modified or removed or added. So in the next comment I left there, I'm proposing an output based on Git status. So I am proposing that by default, when you do Flux diff artifact, we just print a summary saying a new file was added, deleted, or modified. We don't do the actual diff. And when you need the actual full diff, you pass a flag, hyphen full or long or something. Then we actually print the whole diff. If it's a YAML file, all files are YAML, we'll do a semantic diff using diffy or dyff diff. But if it's anything else than YAML, we'll just do unified diff using the Patience algorithm. And I added some more details, like if it's a new file, you can just do what git diff does. Use dev null to indicate that it didn't exist before. Or if it's a deleted file, we'll say ++ dev null, it got deleted. So there are certain details. There's one more section about binary files. We just say it's a binary file. We cannot do diff for it. So that's my kind of a proposal. Did not discuss with anybody. I'm just proposing it. Can add more improvements to it, or any suggestion?
It sounds good to me from just looking at it right now, but I can take some time later to see in detail and possibly bring more feedback, but it sounds good to me the way you suggest.
There's one more thing. Kingdom suggested a few weeks ago. So there is git diff status at stat, right? Git diff. There is a flag called stat. When you do that, along with the file names, like this was modified, it also shows, I think it's called histogram, horizontal histogram, shows +++, minus, and horizontal ASCII art style. And it says this many lines were added or deleted. We can do that as well. Can be good to have. I remember I implemented something similar in GoGit several years ago. I had to write some weird code to calculate this. Like considering the screen size, if your screen is small, this bar should be small. If your screen is big, you can go big. Maybe extra thing if we can add it. Any opinion? Any idea? this topic?
So I see that you added the same topic as well.
Oh,
Uh, yeah, so I was taking a look at that pull request and basically actually looking at the code of the Google library again, because I mean, yeah, it's simple what the pull request is doing. It's replacing all the code we had for making the HTTP request to the metadata endpoint, right? Making them. Um and uh and this I think you might have noticed, but I saw your last comment there for the author. You didn't mention anything about the proxy yet, right? But you're
no,
aware that they're removing.
I read your comment saying it's not using the proxy and you will look into it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, well, I'm kind of divided now on this change because normally I would just prefer using the like it's perfect. Like the implementation that they're suggesting there is like what I would what I would do in most cases, like use the library. The library is made for that. We should use the library. But we're dropping proxy support with that.
Can't we do what we did in the Bucket code?
In the so yeah, the difference is I reviewed that the bucket code, and what we do in the bucket code is using a proxy for talking to the GCS API. We don't have a we don't have a proxy for talking to the metadata endpoint there. Like the proxy that we use there only works for talking to the GCS API. It doesn't work for talking to the side stuff, to the metadata endpoint, for example, workload identity, let's say. So yeah. That like what we basically can't do what we did for bucket, but because in this case, like what let me can I share code a little bit? Or I
Kingdom is not there. I don't think. If you cannot, I don't think we can grant access. We should be able to share it.
oh, but I became the host. Yeah.
Are you?
So
Right, you're
can you
also.
see my screen? Um,
We can also discuss about the notification controller. Oh, there are so many new things. Image automation also has a new thing.
write that in the doc. Let's see.
Can you make
Oh.
the character slightly larger? Because even though I moved it to a large screen, it's hard to read on my end.
I'm just waiting for VS Code to open. It takes a while.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why. It's so sad. It actually improved recently after the latest update. I think they improved performance, but I still have to click. Just keep waiting a few times before it opens. Uh, but yeah,
Well, consider yourself lucky. In Germany, we always wait.
okay, so this is the bucket code. What we need to do here is
Is it me or your screen is not showing the latest thing? I'm still seeing the
Oh.
GitHub diff.
Oh, really? Maybe that's the case. Let me try again.
Maybe yours, oh no, I can see the Ubuntu sidebar.
Use system desktop. I'm trying to like, I'm just using system desktop capture, so I suppose it should Share everything. Can
I
you see
can
my
see
VS
the
Code now?
meeting notes. I can see VS Code.
No, I see a VSC
Cool, cool.
window. Is that what you want to show?
Yes. Sorry. And King, we're hearing some noise from your microphone. Thank you. Cool. So for bucket, what we need to do is like the usual, some Google Cloud a like service, Golang package dot new client, right? This is what you usually do for consuming most services of the Google Cloud. And in this new client, you can pass a few options, right? And one of them is an HTTP client. So we are creating an HTTP client whose transport can use a proxy, and that works for most services, right? So the code that creates this client is here. It's this code here. So we have we clone the default transport of the Go standard library. If we have a URL, we put it here, this base transport. And here we use this Google library for HTTP transports, and we create this transport passing this base transport here. So that's why the proxy works for like communicating with the Google API itself, right? Like, and then we put this transport in this HTTP client, and here it is, and it's used. It's the HTTP client is passed here, and we have an option, and we create the client with that HTTP client with the proxy. But that's used, as I said, this is only for talking to the service itself. The authentication part doesn't use this proxy. And we don't have a similar thing for what the proposed change is trying to do, which is using this function here.
That function.
Yeah,
That's not
the
using the
default.
proxy.
Yeah, that doesn't use a proxy. Like as you can see here, the only parameters you can pass is a context and a list of scopes, which are the Google Cloud scopes, nothing to do with transport options or anything like that. And what this function do is to call this one, which calls this one, and this is the real function that tries all the different methods for authentication, which are these three. So it first looks for this environment variable here, and it should point to a file, and then we read this file here. Here's the file name, and that this function here pretty much is really just reading the file and calling this other function, credentials from JSON with params here, which is the same called in the second attempt here. The only difference is that here it's called like os.read file and the function directly, and in this situation, and in the case for the environment variable, there's this super tiny wrapper here that does these two things. It could even be inlined as well or whatever. But in the end, what's really happening is that you're looking for a file first at pointed by this environment variable or by this well-known file here, which is the user home directory, concatenated with these parts here in the case of non-Windows, and Windows is just gcloud and this. And in Unix, you have this .config as well. So yeah, like there's the default file path, right? When you don't specify one through the environment variable. But in any case, this function like still tries a bunch of like, because this file, this JSON file, it can be a bunch of things. It can be like these comments explain what kind of like what kind of things the JSON can. The JSON can represent either this or this or this. So many different things. Some involve talking to an HTTP endpoint, like making an API call as well, and we would want to have proxy for that as well, but that's not exposed to us again. Like we can't customize the HTTP transport that these like network calls are going to use, um and also the way that standard library does what we do with our own code also doesn't support that, right? So if metadata dot on GCE, then what this token source does here is to talk to the endpoint just like we do, right? Like the current implementation of our library. And it
I
also
read
doesn't
this
support
yesterday.
proxy. Yeah. So I'm basically divided between preventing using this library
The
or
advantage is that it will
or
work
using
with.
it and dropping proxy support altogether.
The advantage is that this strategy would enable federated identity, right? Which we don't do today. So
Sorry?
if it will enable federated identity, you can access Google resources through AWS or elsewhere. The
Yeah.
advantage of using this.
Mhm.
Maybe we can just re-implement this in our code, the above things.
Yeah, I thought about that as well. Like just this function right here, right? Because this one is public, we can reuse it. The like these other parts here are not hard to like. I mean, this is really just reading the environment variable right here. This function is just two function calls, this one and this one, but inside of helper function. And there's the well-known file, which is super easy to implement as well. So I think it would be okay if we copied this code right here to give support for at least to keep support for proxy in when talking to the metadata endpoint on this part here, right? So we want easily, if we decide to reuse this one starts getting complex, you know. There's like some private
But
stuff here.
when you use the federated entity pool, this JSON file contains non-sensitive data. It contains like the
Exactly. It's just a
endpoints that
pointer
you can
to
select.
where is the service account token in your file
Mhm.
system, right? Yeah, right.
So that function, that reading function, that config from JSON, that will read this identity pool JSON as well, right?
Uh, yeah. Sorry, what? What's the question?
So usually when you have a service account, I'm not talking about federated identity,
Uh-huh.
when you have a service account,
The
you
service account
get a
JSON
JSON
has
key.
a private key there. Yeah,
Uh,
the JSON key has a like a one of the fields is like an actual private key, like
mhm,
X509 kind of stuff.
mhm,
And in this case, it has sensitive data, and like
mhm,
the this like credentials from JSON with params works with both. You can either use the workload entity federation use case, which is a JSON without secret data, but you can also use a static JSON service account key as well. Both
mhm.
would work. That
Okay,
that's
then that's much better. So if
um
it's simple, kind of simple, or can be re-implemented, I think we should go with that.
yeah. So I think we can do that. Re-implement, like we basically copy this function right here, replacing this part to use our own current code, right? Because we have support for proxy and this one doesn't. So we replace this one with ours.
And
Then,
remove the static thing.
sorry.
we have a static hard-coded URL.
Yes,
we-
sorry, go ahead.
Can we replace our hard-coded URL code with this?
Like the thing is that here, like in our code, like for the last release, right? I introduced proxy support. This one doesn't. But like if you're asking just if they have like the URL as a constant, as a public constant in the code, we can check that. But like well, this function we use this. I use this function in one of our tests somewhere. This
Hmm.
one is like it triggers two requests, one using the IP and one using, well, it's not
The
even in a
host name.
constant. Yeah, the one that this is the one that we have. We have this host and also the path as the constant, right, in our code.
I
Okay, so
think when you're inside GCP infrastructure, you can use the domain name.
yes. Sorry, I think my internet
16.
failed.